The Heaven's Gate cult, perhaps one of the most widely known cults of our time, right along with the People's Temple and the Rajneesh movement. Following the trend of most infamous cults, many people died pointlessly. Let's begin with their leader, Marshall Applewhite. First of all, yes, Applewhite is his real last name. What is an Applewhite? I have no idea. Anyway, Applewhite was born on May 17th, 1931 in Spur, Texas. For his entire life, he was extremely religious, being born Presbyterian. He attended many universities throughout his time, initially wanting to become a minister. However, early into this, he decided to leave his studies to pursue a music career. He became the music director at a church in North Carolina. In 1954, he was drafted by the U.S. Army. He got out in 1956 and enrolled at the University of Colorado to earn a master's degree in music. He moved to New York after graduating and pursued an unsuccessful career in singing. He then began to teach at the University of Alabama, but was fired after he pursued a sexual relationship with one of his male students. This was problematic to his religious teachings, and he was ultimately frustrated by his desires. He divorced from his wife in 1965 after learning of an affair. He then moved to Houston to teach at the University of St. Thomas. Here, he served under the music board and was popular on the local singing scene. He was also very briefly openly gay, but also had a relationship with a woman. In 1970, he resigned from the University of St. Thomas. It is speculated that he left because of another relationship with a student, but it is uncertain. Applewhite claimed he left due to severe emotional issues. In 1971, his father passed away, which left him in an even worse emotional state, where he suffered with severe depression. In 1972, Applewhite met Bonnie Nettles. Bonnie Nettles, the woman who opened him up to the philosophy of Heaven's Gate. Together, the two discussed prophecy. Nettles informed Applewhite that the two were forced together by aliens. Around this time, Applewhite had a vision in which he took upon a role such as that of Jesus. The two became extremely close and began living together. Applewhite cut off all contact with his family when the two lived together, and Nettles lost custody of her children in a particularly nasty divorce. Applewhite's mental state began to deteriorate at a harsh rate. By 1974, the duo had developed a solid structure for a religious belief system. Their ideology involved Jesus being reincarnated as a man from Texas, or Applewhite himself. Unsurprisingly, not many people were open to this. Also in 1974, Applewhite was arrested and sent to jail for 6 months. Here he totally abandoned his newly developed religious systems and focused more on aliens and the idea of evolution. After he was released, he and Nettles began recruiting followers. Have you ever heard of the show Ancient Aliens? On the History Channel, where a bunch of loons discuss how everything in human history has happened because of aliens that have visited us in our past. Well, Applewhite, if he were alive, would be really great on this show. He developed a belief that we have been visited in the past by ancient aliens. Do you like how I brought that full circle? Anyway, he used a lot of Star Trek terminology and often claimed that aliens spoke to him through the show. That idea to me is kinda crazy. By 1975, the duo had amassed around 70 followers who were forced to renounce, quote, friends, family, media, drugs, alcohol, jewelry, facial hair, and sexuality. They were also apparently told to take biblical names in place of their birth names. In 1976, in the Medicine Bow National Forest in Wyoming, Nettles and Applewhite gathered their followers on the promise of a visit from a UFO, but Nettles later announced that the visit was canceled. In 1983, Nettles had to have an eye removed due to cancer, and she died 2 years later. Due to Applewhite's persuasion, he managed to keep his followers, but he himself fell into a harsh depression. Around then, Applewhite struggled with his faith particularly hard. His ideology evolved into something much more than it was previously. He began to tell his followers that they were in need of strict guidance, that they would never reach the next level, or heaven, without his help. When Nettles died, Applewhite was forced to alter his teachings. When she passed, her body was left behind, which went against what the two taught about the body ascending and reincarnating. He altered it to say that the spirit would ascend to a UFO, which would take the spirit to another planet, which was viewed as heaven. The spirit would then inhabit a new body. He also taught that Jesus was an alien, and when he was killed, his spirit ascended to the spaceship, which took him to the next level. He told his followers that people had the opportunity to reach the next level every 2,000 years, and by the 90s, it would be the first time to ascend since the death of Jesus. By the early 90s, there were 26 members. In 93, the group was renamed Total Overcomers Anonymous, and Applewhite took out an ad in USA Today, which resulted in 20 former members rejoining. Applewhite also posted his teachings to the early internet, however he was met with resounding criticism, which didn't help with his overwhelming paranoia. He was now becoming more and more urgent about reaching the next level. He saw suicide as a way to reach the next level even faster. The group was renamed to what we know it as now, Heaven's Gate. So what about Heaven's Gate? Well, there were many harsh and strict rules that Applewhite enforced. For instance, he was very adamant that there was no sexuality in the next level. He enforced this by making members wear the same clothes and by making them have the same haircuts. Members were forced to renounce their identities and vices. No member was to take part in their vices, such as smoking, and had to give up who they were by not wearing jewelry, for instance, and by wearing the exact same clothes. Sexual relationships were strictly banned. Apparently, some members took this to the next level by having themselves castrated, including Applewhite himself. Members partook in daily rituals and chores to keep their minds on moving forward to the next level, and off of average human thoughts. Each member had to change their names to something that ended with Odie. They were not allowed to contact their friends outside of the group or their families. Money was incredibly important to them, even the smallest amounts. Overall, the members basically lived a life such as a monk would in a monastery. One member who left claimed he still believes in the group's ideology, but he could not live the lifestyle. So before we reach the climax of the story of Heaven's Gate, we have some things to go over. In an effort to be original and to have all sides of the story, I reached out to Heaven's Gate. How did I do this? Aren't they all dead? Well, no. Today, there are 2 surviving members. It is speculated that their names are Mark and Sarah, but as far as I know, there is no information confirming this. It is actually remarkably easy to reach out to them. On the group's website, which they have meticulously maintained for 20 years, there is an email that you can contact. I honestly didn't expect for them to respond. I sort of figured that after doing this for so long, the emails would generally go unanswered. But to my surprise, one of the 2 responded to my email within just a few hours. I feel as if I learned quite a bit through this process, so let's dive into the interview. Hello, I am making a documentary-style video on my YouTube channel about Heaven's Gate, and figure that for the sake of production, as well as having all sides of the story, that it would be best if I contacted the source directly. If you would be willing to answer a handful of questions for me, I would be very grateful. Thank you in advance. Their response was, that is fine with us. So my next email said, thank you so much for such a fast reply. I guess my first question would be, how did it initially make you feel when the rest of the members left? And how did you feel when you learned you would be left behind? We're fine with it. They have their task, we have ours. I guess I'm not super sure what I expected when I asked this. When you are so dedicated to a task and the rewards that come with it, you likely don't care if it takes a while for you to reach your goal. However, I learned through research that all of the members had close, platonic friendships. I figured moreover that they would be lonely and disheartened when all of their friends left them behind to move on to the next level without them. My next question was, what exactly is their task and what is yours, if you don't mind me asking? They said, we were instructed to protect, archive, and disseminate the information of the next level to the world. They were instructed to transfer into new space-capable next-level bodies and depart the planet on a craft. Fascinating. Moving on, what was life like for the average member? Were there standard day-to-day tasks you were expected to complete? They said, we all performed daily chores in a communal-like experience. We shared work with our task members to do daily cooking, cleaning, shopping, maintenance, and laundry that occurred around the house. We also worked full-time jobs to pay for all the expenses that came up. We were all average members. Only T and Do had the position of teachers. Here I learned that each member performed daily rituals. It was surprising to me that each member was just an average member. I figured Applewhite would likely act as a higher up, almost like a leader. By the time I conducted the interview, most of my research was complete, so I had no who T and Do were. Come to find out, T and Do were actually Applewhite and Nettles. These were the names they chose for themselves while being apparently meaningless. Not entirely sure how I missed this, but let's move on. Here, it took me a few days to respond. I said, sorry for such a late response. What would you say has been the greatest challenge since everything happened? Maybe dealing with the media or perhaps something else. They said, as far as our task, it is getting the information out to the world. Interest is slow at times. As far as legal issues, people still keep infringing and using our materials illegally. That is a constant time and money issue. I figured that their greatest issue would have been dealing with harassment, but I was apparently wrong. The legal issues were, however, not at all surprising to me. The most recent that I can think of, and most notorious of these legal issues, was with the rapper Lil Uzi Vert back in July and August of this year. Uzi revealed the artwork for his album Eternal Ataki, which, in the defense of Heaven's Gate, the artwork is basically the exact same as their logo. Again, this took me about 8 days to respond. I said sorry for the late response again. Thank you so much for your time in responding to my messages. If there is anything particularly important that you feel I may have missed, I'd greatly appreciate anything you'd have to tell me. All of this has been incredibly insightful and useful. They said, we are not aware as to how much you have researched this topic to know what you have missed. Do you have a chance to view the 16 official videotapes here? So what are these videotapes? I didn't know about them before they were actually brought to my attention. The Vimeo bio reads, quote, "The video on this channel was produced by members of the Heaven's Gate group. It is being provided here by the Tele Foundation for those who wish to know what the group was about and why these individuals devoted themselves fully to the pursuit of the physical kingdom of heaven. To read the book, How and When Heaven's Gate May Be Entered, please visit heavensgate.com. The Tele Foundation, heavensgate.com, and this Vimeo channel are not affiliated with any other online entities, including commercial or personal websites or blogs, networking sites, video channels, or file sharing sites. The posting of this video does not indicate that there is another group to join, as there is none." The videos range from an hour to 2 hours long, and there are 16 of them. If I sat down to watch each one of these videos all the way through, it would take me at least 2 days. So if you feel so inclined to watch some of them for yourself, I will put a link in the description, probably at the top. By March of 1997, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult committed mass suicide by eating applesauce laced with barbiturates, followed by a vodka. They then placed bags over their heads and shrouds over their bodies. When police found their bodies in a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, each member was wearing a black tracksuit and Nikes. The Nike decades were poking out of the shrouds, creating an image to mark the end of a millennium. Each member had $5.75 in their pockets. To this day, this is the largest mass suicide in US history. But the members of Heaven's Gate viewed this not as a suicide, but as transcending their spirits into a spaceship following the Hale-Bopp comet that would take them to the next level, as stated earlier. Hale-Bopp was the brightest comet observed in all of the 20th century and was visible for an incredible 18 months. So overall, what do I think of Heaven's Gate? What did I take away from this, and what's my analysis? Well, I think this is a very complicated situation, especially compared to subjects like Chris Chan and Elliot Rodger. I think with the two of them, you had a very straightforward set of situations. But with Heaven's Gate, I feel like there are a lot of layers that lead up to the overall climax. People like Applewhite and Nettles had a ton of issues. Their relationship with others, their upbringings, and their relationship between themselves created such an unstable foundation for the organization to rest upon. With everything that happened in Applewhite's life, he became what I believe to be a truly unstable individual. I believe that it became much worse when he met Nettles. Moreover, I feel terrible for the members of Heaven's Gate, living and dead. To have a person like Applewhite as their leader, a man who was not only a talker but was very articulate and manipulative, push the prerogative that he did was dangerous, especially to a group as vulnerable as they were. In life, I believe that we all want something to be a part of. We all want something that we can identify with and fit in with. I think Applewhite took some kind of care in recruiting people who were vulnerable, or tailored his advertising toward people who were looking for something that they could fit in with. I'm pretty conflicted on what I feel here, if I'm honest. I think when you analyze a cult, you almost can't be too critical of the average member because they're vulnerable, as I previously said. They follow what the leader says because they want something they can believe in and be passionate about. Especially with religion, people want the promise of an eternal afterlife, happiness after death. The members were promised this by Applewhite, and more, which I believe every member wanted more than anything else in life. If that weren't the case, why would they totally renounce their lives and individuality? If you're looking to point fingers, we need to blame and be critical of Applewhite and Nettles for manipulating their members into committing suicide in the promise of eternal happiness. So with all of that being said, I'm Adam, and this has been Freakishly Bizarre. Thank you for watching.